Revelations. The film opens with a young girl, A Young, walking in an alley towards Mission Nation Church as a suspicious man follows A Young. The man continues to follow A Young inside the church. From afar, a woman looks at the suspicious man's movements. After the church meeting, the man, Kwan Young Ray, follows A Young outside. However, the church pastor, Seong Min Chan, stops Kwan as he looks new to the church. To convince Kwan to join the church, Min Chan asks about Kwan and asks him to fill out a form as he needs to answer a private investigator's call. Through the private investigator, Min Chan learns that his wife, Lee Si-young, is cheating on Min Chan. When Min Chan walks inside, Kwan tries to leave hurriedly, so Min Chan helps Kwan put on his shoes. As Min Chan does that, he sees an ankle monitor on Kwan's leg and is taken aback. Still, Min Chan says Kwan is welcome to the church. Outside, Yon Hui angrily stares at Kwan. Before Yon Hui can follow Kwan, she gets a call from her father. Meanwhile, Min Chan drops Si-young off at a supposed reunion, which Min Chan knows is a lie. On the way, Si-young notices a new church that Pastor Jung, whom Min Chan already knows, is planning to build. At home, Yon Hui's father asks Yon Hui to be careful as he has lost a daughter, and Yon Hui is the only one he has. Elsewhere, Min Chan visits Pastor Jung, hoping to hear an offer to become a pastor in the new church. But the pastor asks Min Chan for a recommendation. Outside the church, Min Chan bumps into Pastor Jung's son, Hwan-su. From Hwan-su, Min Chan learns that Young wants Hwan-su to run the new church. At night, Si-young calls Min Chan to ask about their kid Yeonu's whereabouts. Since Yeonu is not at daycare, Min Chan suspects Kwan. After surfing the web, Min Chan learns about Kwan's whereabouts. At home, Yon Hui has a nightmare about her sister Yeonju. It turns out Kwan had physically abused and tortured Yeonju, and for all those days, Yeonju hoped Yon Hui would find her. Because of this, Yon Hui has PTSD as she feels guilty for not saving her sister sooner. Meanwhile, Min Chan sees Kwan outside his residence with a shovel and a garbage bag. Panicked, Min Chan calls the police and says Kwan is behaving suspiciously. As Kwan leaves, taking his van, Min Chan follows him. Inside a forested area, Min Chan stops the car because he can't spot Kwan. Suddenly, Kwan arrives with his van from behind and approaches Min Chan. Seeing Min Chan, Kwan says he is headed home and walks back. However, Min Chan is convinced Kwan has Yeonyu, so Min Chan starts looking inside Kwan's van. When Min Chan squats down, he notices the ankle monitor missing from Kwan's leg. Now Kwan and Min Chan start fighting each other. While fighting, Kwan accidentally falls down a slight slope and hits his head on a rock. At that moment, Si-young calls Min Chan to inform him that Yeonu is safe. As Min Chan cuts the call, he sees a face on the hill opposite him. Sadly, Min Chan thinks Kwan is dead. Min Chan pushes Kwan down the cliff. The next morning, as it is Yon Hui's first day in the Violent Crimes Division, her partner Yoon-gyu introduces himself and takes her to a briefing. The cops find bizarre drawings inside Kwan's house. At the church, Yon Hui and Yoon-gyu arrive to ask Min Chan some questions. The police tell Min Chan that a Yong from the church is also missing. At the church, Yon Hui notices Min Chan's dirt-covered, muddy jacket and shoes. Pastor Jung calls Min Chan to the church. There, Young reveals that Hwan-su has committed adultery and wants Min Chan to become the pastor of the new church. When Young says this, Min Chan sees a Jesus-like image before him. At the police station, the cops try to gather more information about Kwan from his psychiatrist doctor, Lee Nak-seong. In a flashback, we see during Kwan's trial, Nak-seong says Kwan had undergone physical abuse because of his stepfather. This has developed into violent behavior in Kwan. At that time, Yon Hui completely lost control and was escorted outside the court. At present, Yon Hui confronts Nak-seong, asking for his reasoning. Yeon-hoi blames A-young's kidnapping on Nak-seong as he takes Kwan's side, and the crimes are repeated. Because of Nak-seong, Kwan's story goes viral, and people sympathize with Kwan, which hurts Yeonju deeply, pushing her to the edge and killing herself. At the church, Min-chan consoles A-young's mother, assuring her that A-young is alive. The police find Kwan's car and hurry there. Since Min-chan is driving A-young's mother home, she gets a call about Kwan's car location, so Min-chan drives A-young's mother there. At the crime scene, Min-chan asks the cops if they didn't find a body. Later, Min-chan drops Si-young at the care center and decides to confront Si-young about her affair. After Min-chan pushes Si-young, she confesses to the sin of adultery, and Min-chan prays for her. On the way to the care center, they spot an ambulance and offer to help, but the men refuse, saying a tow truck will arrive. At the center, Min-chan learns about a wounded man who has come crawling from the mountains to the living center. Immediately, Min-chan suspects Kwan. After the women enter the center, Min-chan looks for and finds Kwan. Even in that painful state, Kwan mumbles that a pastor tried to kill him. At that time, Min-chan sees an angelic figure in the sky. Afraid of getting caught, Min-chan secretly takes Kwan in a wheelchair away from the center. When the ambulance arrives, they realize Kwan is missing. In an abandoned building, Min-chan ties Kwan and says it is divine intervention for Min-chan and Kwan to run into each other. Subsequently, Kwan reveals that A-young is alive, but if Kwan dies, so will A-young. With that in mind, Kwan asks Min-chan to call the cops, and then he will reveal everything. As Min-chan panics, Kwan sings a hymn. Descending the stairs, Min-chan falls and sees D24 equals 7 on the wall. At the church, everyone prays for A-young, and Min-chan reads the passage Deuteronomy 24:7, and he relates that to the numbers on the wall. Meanwhile, Yeon-hoi arrives at the church and sees Min-chan's car covered with dirt. When Yeon-hoi takes the mud and sniffs it, she smells mulberry. Now Yeon-hoi is in the abandoned building and finds Kwan. Unfortunately, Yeon-hoi is haunted by her sister's vision, asking Yeon-hoi to kill Kwan. This time, Kwan recognizes Yeon-hoi and messes with her more, saying that A-young is alive. Suddenly, Min-chan attacks Yeon-hoi. Unfortunately, Min-chan also ties Yeon-hoi and tells her that A-young is dead despite what Kwan says. There is tension between them as Kwan provokes Yeon-hoi, saying Yeonju's death is not Kwan's fault. Meanwhile, Min-chan is convinced A-young is dead, and God has asked Min-chan to kill Kwan. At the same time, Yeon-hoi tries to persuade Min-chan that A-young is alive. Suddenly, Kwan starts to sing some hymns. Seizing the opportunity, Yeon-hoi frees herself and handcuffs Min-chan. However, Kwan slips and falls from the building. Before falling to the ground, Kwan says the one-eyed monster ate A-young. Later, as cops take Min-chan away, he is happy to see Kwan dead. In a redevelopment area, A-young is locked up in an abandoned building. The workers demolishing the buildings are unaware that a girl is inside. Elsewhere, Yeon-hoi is at Nak-seong's office, where she learns about Kwan's life. One key insight Yeon-hoi learns is when Kwan used to get hit by his stepfather, Kwan's mother used to sing some hymns outside. According to Nak-seong, the one-eyed monster could represent Kwan's stepfather. Suddenly, Yeon-hoi starts to hallucinate, which Nak-seong notices. After hearing Yeon-hoi's guilt-filled story, Nak-seong explains that Yeon-hoi's visions aren't that different from those of Kwan or Min-chan. As Kwan blamed the monster, Min-chan blamed God's revelations, and Yeon-hoi blamed herself. The doctor asked Yeon-hoi to think of what could have triggered Kwan to commit crimes again. Thanks to Yeon-hoi's father's scaffolding project, Yeon-hoi realizes that the house with a single or one-eyed window was Kwan's trigger, as Yeonju also had a single window. Immediately, Yan Hui informs the other cops and rushes to the redevelopment area. Thankfully, Yan Hui reaches just in time to save A-Yong. The first thing A-Yong says is that she knew someone would rescue her. After that, Min-chan is put behind bars. A while later, Yan Hui visits Min-chan in prison and informs him that A-Yong is alive and well. Through the conversation, Min-chan realizes he has been obsessing without reason. In the prison cell, Min-chan wipes off the Jesus-like image he has drawn. In the end, A-Yong is saved, and Min-chan faces the consequences of his actions. Unlike Kwon, Min-chan ultimately realizes that the divine revelations he believed in were nothing more than hallucinations, manifestations of his obsession and unraveling mind.